Welcome back to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. This week on the show, we're launching our second installment of Tales of the Tape, the Sports Medicine series. If you haven't checked out our first series that shares incredible detail about Tommy John surgery, rehab, and recovery, check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Our new 3-part series launching today with episode 1 will focus on youth arm health and sports specialization in America, featuring some of the top minds in athletic training. Today on episode 1, we sit down with World Series champion, former PBATS president, and Texas Rangers longtime Senior Director of Medical Operations, Jamie Reed. Don't forget to tune in next week as we sit down with Baltimore Orioles head athletic trainer Brian Ebel to dive deeper into this topic. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to another edition of Inside Athletic Training and another episode of Tales in the Tape. I'm your host, Corey Tremble, and today we will be diving into youth baseball and the challenges that that space is currently facing around the country. We are very honored to be joined by the Senior Director of Medical Operations for the Texas Rangers, Jamie Reed. Jamie has not only had a Hall of Fame career as a past PBATS president and certified athletic trainer with the Orioles, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Texas Rangers, but he's been on the front lines of educating and helping navigate the health concerns that our youth and amateur players are facing. So, Jamie, let's take a look back at the early days of when this all began and this uptick of youth sports injuries. And I know that you've known Dr. James Andrews for close to 40 years, and he's been probably the biggest advocate of trying to corral this youth injury issue. So take me back to the early days when you started seeing this uptick and when your concern levels started to increase.
I'd say it really started, Corey, and thanks for having me on, by the way. It really started for me when I was the head athletic trainer with the Tampa Bay Rays in the late 90s. And Dr. Andrews was the medical director for the Tampa Bay Rays and did a lot of speaking for him. And, we spent a lot of time together. And he was telling me about these, he was starting to see like younger and younger athletes come in with elbow injuries, and wasn't sure what it was exactly, whether it was overuse or mechanics or whatever. So it kind of piqued my curiosity because our son, Zach, was in high school in Florida and had gone through, the different layers of baseball as he got older. And I would watch, especially in Florida baseball, there were just no parameters on pitch limits. And you worked in professional baseball a long time, as I have, and we know that when a starting pitcher is getting, to 80, 85 pitches, and he's highly trained, specifically strengthened, great mechanics, everything that he should have going for him, he does. And at 80 or 85 pitches, we start getting people moving around in the bullpen because we don't want to, overextend him, so to speak. So I knew that from my professional side. But here I am watching my son play high school baseball, and he wasn't a pitcher, he was a catcher, but you'd start to see these concerning trends that pitchers were cocking their arm a lot more than they should. It was not really age appropriate. So I started digging more and more into it, and I moved after the 2002 season. I came to Texas, and Dr. Keith Meister joined me a year later, and we started, really delving into it at that point. And we started to see some concerns and causes. And, it's just kind of been a passion of mine. And when I first got to Texas, Gene and the kids were still back in Florida. So I thought, it's a great opportunity to kind of get out in the community and try to make a difference. So I spoke at a lot of little league conferences and preseason conferences and, parents that come to watch their kids at the, youth ranger academies. And I would speak to the parents and some of the coaches. And it was interesting at that point. The parents were fascinated by what I was saying and had, took notes and had a lot of great questions. And it was the coaches who weren't really very interested and didn't really appreciate what I was saying. But, 20 years later, it's interesting. Nobody wants to hear it anymore because it can't be their child. The child would never go through that, never be abused of that. Never been in that situation. So it's an interesting dynamic how it's got to play itself out. And as you know, Corey, because you've probably seen it a couple of times, I have a PowerPoint that I've given probably over 50 times going back to 2008. And every time I'm asked to give it, I update it, and the numbers become more and more staggering. So it's an issue that is not going away. And I'm sure as we get deeper into this conversation, we'll talk about some of the specific points.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we've seen this uptick, and it's just such a concerning situation for all of our youth athletes, especially those that want to play beyond the amateur ranks and want to play professionally. And you made a great point. And you're one of the few people that probably have spent a significant time in both the two of the three major states of year-round playing of any sport, but specifically baseball, Texas and Florida. What has been, do you think, the biggest challenge for those athletes, and why we're having these issues? Is it the year-round playing and the club ball and the travel ball? Is it just certain kids are unlucky? What do you attribute to it, especially spending so much time in both Texas and Florida?
I think the big thing is this sport specialization at a very young age, and these kids are playing. They start excelling at one sport, and in our case, it's baseball. And at 10 or 11 years old, they're one of the better players on the team, and so they play more baseball and they play more with more teams. And I used to think that the kids up north, and my draft data would suggest that the kids up north were weather protected for a long time. It got cold up north, so they moved to soccer fields or football fields or indoors to playing basketball, and their arms or shoulders and elbows were kind of protected. But now with all these baseball warehouses that pop up virtually all over the country, including the cold weather cities and states, you kind of see it from everywhere now, so to speak. So that's really a concern. And a lot of it, I think, is just education from, you and I and every other athletic trainer who works in professional baseball. People look to us for guidance, and we have to have a good, safe message for a take-home for the parents. These kids who are really good at baseball at 10 or 11 or 12 years old, they don't play on one team. It's two teams and then a select team and then fall all-star and, a winter camp and everything else. So the onus is not really on the coach when it gets to that situation, because he can't keep track of the other two teams and use. It's really falls again on the parents. So they need to protect their kids. And I think it's up to us to get that message out.
No, you're 100% right that the information isn't getting across all these teams, and it's not getting into everybody's ears, and it's probably the main culprit to all these issues. And I want to kind of touch on what we're seeing. You mentioned the draft and these amateur athletes coming out into professional baseball or having the opportunity to play in professional baseball. One of your former players, Colby Lewis, who pitched in the big leagues for a long time, was probably, I'd have to look it up, but he was, if not the first, he was one of the first players that had Tommy John surgery in high school to actually reach the big leagues. Now it's way more commonplace, unfortunately. How prevalent are you seeing, or how prevalent is this, and how much are you seeing the high school athlete in your draft reviews already undergoing Tommy John surgery? And is this really as big of a concern as maybe the media makes it out to be?
It really is as big a concern. And you're right, Colby Lewis, I think, was the first high school player who had a Tommy John surgery, had an ulnar collateral reconstruction surgery, and actually by the inventor, the originator of the surgery, by Dr. Frank Jobe in L.A. So Colby had it done by a great surgeon. But he had pitched a lot growing up in California, and he admits that, he was a big, strong kid, and he was a big, strong player in Major League Baseball also, but he was probably abused quite a bit. And, Colby's a guy who, besides having a TJ at age 16, had open rotator cuff repair with the Rangers early on in his career, and then had a flexor tendon repair by Dr. Keith Meister near the end of his career. So he certainly knew a lot of overuse arm injuries. So, that was a sign or signal, but he was kind of a one-off, so it was probably ignored. But in 2014, I kind of stepped away from being the head athletic trainer with the Rangers and more of a kind of a global organizational medical director, and got to delve into a lot of different areas. And one of them was the draft. And back in 2014 through, COVID in 2020, there were 40 rounds in the draft. And I would look at anywhere between 550 and 650 medical reports on that many players before the draft and kind of do a medical risk assessment on them. And the first year, and the numbers are fairly consistent. The first year, I think there were 35 guys who had either had a TJ out of, say, 600 medical reviews I looked at, or I felt were headed in that direction pretty quickly with MRIs and consistent issues. And it went from 35 the first year to 65 to 85 to 95. And in 2007, it hit 130. 2017, it 230. In the last year of 40 rounds of draft, 2019, there were 331 players that I reviewed who either had a TJ or had an MRI that Dr. Meister felt was headed in that direction pretty quickly. And so there's a higher level of risk if we were going to draft that player. So the numbers don't lie. They speak for themselves. And we've done quite a bit of follow-up on if these players did have a TJ, and the overwhelming majority who ended up continuing to playing or did have a TJ at some point in their early professional career.
It's unbelievable, and I know we both know Dr. Meister very well, and you brought him up quite a bit, and probably nobody in the country is seeing more amateur and professional athletes for the elbow than Dr. Meister, and there's nobody probably talking to him more than you on a day-to-day basis. So, obviously he's emerged as the foremost expert in arm injuries, and much like Dr. Andrews, he wishes he could go out of business in that regard where he doesn't see an elbow ever again. So what conversations have you had with him, especially as of late, that, his dance card is pretty full every surgery day, unfortunately. So what are the conversations that you've had with Keith, and how has that changed and grown over the years, unfortunately, in this space?
I think it started out as the pitch counts and
sports specialization, and it's really evolved into not only the pitch counts, but the velocity. And now the high velocity of the off-speed pitches, the power changeups, the power sweepers, which is basically a slider but thrown almost like a fastball. And they're creating incredible torques on the medial elbow. And, Dr. Meister will tell you that when he goes into repair an elbow now, it's not just a tear. In his own words, he said it's almost like an explosion happening there. There's just so much force on the flexor tendon, but specifically on our collateral ligament, that it's just a complete blow up. It's a bigger surgery, and that's when he started doing the hybrid. But to answer your question, going back, we used to look at, internal rotation deficit, GERD, definitely creates some vascular stresses. So we would talk about those things. We talked about pitch counts. We talked about not sports specializing. And every year it's kind of evolved and evolved and evolved. And, even as recently as a couple of years ago, but going back to 2014 when I went to Japan for 10 days just to study their injury rates, grip on the baseball is a big factor too. And why do so many young Japanese pitchers who come over to the States and play Major League Baseball have a Tommy John within their first 2 years here? And it's over 75% of those guys who come over, Otani being probably the most recent or biggest name, that have a TJ. And it's, the baseball in Japan has it's a tacky ball, so that the players trust their grip, and they don't have to squeeze harder than some of our major league pitchers feel like they need to get the motion, the rotation on the baseball, the control that they are here. So there are a lot of factors. It's definitely been an evolving thing. It's not like, in 2013 or 12, it's this, and we're sticking with this. We continue to study it. I continue to talk to him because you're right, his dance card is full. You can imagine going to high school graduation or high school reunion and 300 people show up and it's a big crowd. Well, that's what he's doing now. He's doing 300 TJs a year. So if he had his 5-year reunion, he'd have, 1,500 people in the room who had a TJ by just Dr. Meister alone. And it's overwhelming numbers, quite honestly.
Yeah, it really is. And when you look at it, you see all these factors and variables and reasons for it, and we kind of have an answer, but nobody unfortunately really wants to listen to a lot of those answers. It's their thought process is, well, we'll just have more elbows or new elbows. That's the answer. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to, be able to stand the test of time and actually be a true result and product that we are looking for. But when we're starting to look at the issues that are creating it, and now we kind of have a good idea of some of the factors that are causing it and how we could possibly address it. Let's look at how you personally address these conversations with the different stakeholders that you're going to be around. And let's start off with parents first. I know you've mentioned parents a few times and how early on they were really diligent about taking notes and listening, and now it might not be the same. And again, we all want the best for our children, and we're all looking for them to do great things on the field. But we sometimes can get a little carried away and start living through them, unfortunately. So what's the conversation and the message that now you give to parents before, when you may have thought these were some of the reasons, to now that these are some of the reasons this is happening?
I suggest to parents, and I will never say no to, a parent group of baseball players or even softball players, for that matter, that they should sit down. I would gladly go out and speak and educate them on the latest science and say, before your son or daughter starts pitching in a season, sit down and map out what are his pitch counts per game, what are his pitch counts per week, what are his pitch counts for the entire season, and are you going to allow him to play on a second team? Are you going to let his spring seasons, roll into a summer all-star and then a fall all-star team? And if so, multiple positions is the way to go. So I put the onus on the parents. Go buy one of those clickers that every pitching coach still uses, and every time your son cocks or daughter cocks their arm to throw a pitch, you click it. And that includes when he's getting the bullpen warming up to throw. That includes in between innings when he's throwing, and have a limit and make the coach aware of it that, little Johnny's got 35 pitches today and that's it. And I'd also, you've been in clubhouses almost as long as I have. The two things that are always on the TV when they're going on in the athletic training room in the clubhouse are any of the major golf events, especially the Masters. Guys are just locked in on it. And then the Little League World Series still garners a lot of attention from major league players. They enjoy watching it, and they're just fascinated how many guys are throwing sliders and curveballs and big velo for the little kids. And it was not that long ago that the pitch limit from Little League Baseball was 10 times their age. So a 12-year-old could start his last batter with 119 pitches, which is amazing because we don't let like I referenced earlier, our skeletally mature, highly trained major league pitchers go 120 pitches. And Dr. Andrews and USA Baseball kind of nudged that number down to 7 times their age. But that's still, for me, and Keith and I, Meister and I, talked about this a lot. If my son's a talented young pitcher, I'm going 4 times his age. So a 10-year-old's throwing no more than 40 pitches. A 12-year-old is throwing no more than 48 pitches, because 48 pitches plus all the warm-ups and in between inning throws is still going to get to 75 or 80. And I was down, my grandson was playing down in Kerrville, Texas a couple of weeks ago, and my wife and I, Jean, drove down to watch him play. It was his last game, and they had the smallest kid on the team through 2 innings, but he threw 84 pitches in 2 innings. So I counted him in the bullpen and just out of curiosity, and he cocked his arm 120 times. Now, this is a 9-year-old who's 6 inches shorter than just about every other kid on the team. And, I want to say something, but I need to be careful. And I don't think it's the coach's fault, because she was asking the scorekeeper how many pitches. She's basing it off of USA Baseball recommendations, but that's still way too many pitches for me. So, the onus for me goes back to the parents if they want to protect them. And as Dr. Meister has, told me, he said a couple times in his clinic, probably more than a couple of times, parents will bring their son in with elbow pain, and he can throw 160 feet. He's touching 81 as a 12-year-old on the mound, and he's doing this and he does that, and he made this all-star team. And Keith Meister will look at the parents and say, well, there's only one problem. And parents are like, what? What's the problem? Problem is, you're on my exam table right now. Your son's on my exam table, and he's got this issue. So they don't realize it's an issue until it's too late. And I'll tell you, Corey, just this spring, I've had 3 Ranger employees call and talk to me about their son's elbow. And all 3 of them had what's called a little league elbow. It's the growth plate, the physis is open on the medial elbow, and it just pulls away with all the forces. At that point, the ligament and the muscles are probably more stronger than and can handle the load tolerances better than the growing bone. And those are elbows that have to have a screw put in them oftentimes before they heal. And so, what's the answer? I'm not sure. I wish I knew it, but I think education is almost always the answer. And I think what baseball and every other sport wants is really good athletes. And the best way to develop your athleticism is to play multiple sports. There's footwork. I always tell players to play soccer in the off season because good footwork will always play and enhance your baseball career. And talking about the NFL draft last year, 29 of the 32 first-round picks played multiple sports in high school. So you don't have to specialize early. As a matter of fact, you should not specialize early. That's where I'd like to see this go.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that any of us in the game that have been around for a while, we're the go-to when somebody that we work with kid or somebody in the community that we know, a friend's kid that has a sore arm, they always ask us for advice and direction. So let's talk on that for a minute. Obviously the parents will approach you, but a lot of times you're going to be facing that child, looking at their arm and kind of talking to them. So what kind of red flags do you kind of pick up on when you're talking with a youth athlete, especially for our young athletic trainers that are listening to this, or our athletic training students that might be working with different populations than what we do? What are some of the red flags that you look for from the player himself versus what the parents might be telling you in their story?
Yeah, I think if a young baseball player, and I'm going to say I would include high school, but let's say every young baseball player who has not yet reached high school, if they want to ice after the game because they feel like they need to ice, or they ask for Advil before a game because their elbow or shoulder is sore, that's a huge red flag. And it's more and more common than I thought it would be. Those things weren't really, ice was available, but Advil wasn't when I was playing a lot of baseball growing up. But I played multiple sports, and I think those are the big signs. But also, just watching him pitch, does the velocity go down as he pitches? Because he's fatigued? Is he losing his command, his control? Is he walking a lot more than he used to? There are a lot of flags that you can subtly see, and a lot of kids won't say anything, but you can, if you look for it. Like when I watch youth baseball, little league, I watch my grandson play. I'm watching the pitch counts. I'm not watching really anything else. But there are tools that parents can be taught, keep an eye on, that are indicators that, hey, this is not going the way it usually always does go, and I think we need to back off a little bit.
You mentioned that our coaches are working with some of the highest end players, the 1% of the 1%, and we're not even asking these grown, physically capable, strong men to do some of the things we're asking 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds to do. If you had a stage to speak to some of these coaches or some of these programs that put on these big showcases, what message would you give them to try to bring them back down to earth and say, hey, look, I work with the best of the best coaches and I work with the best of the best players. We're not asking, and we would shake our heads if a coach ever said, this is what I want out of one of these players. So what would that message be to them if you have that opportunity?
I think the message would be, we've kind of beat up the pitch counts, but like I said, when I was down in Kerrville, Texas, and I watched this little kid throw over 80 pitches in 2 innings, we have, our starting pitcher, if he struggles in the second inning and has a 35-pitch inning, we've already got help ready for him in the bullpen because we don't let it get to that point. But I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to put the onus on Major League Baseball because this is protecting our own industry. This is letting the best 12-year-old baseball players stay healthy and make it to the point where they can walk onto a Major League field and play or pitch. And I think as an industry, and MLB is the industry standard, or should be, and certainly the leader, we should be having clinics in the winter all over the country. And there are plenty of alumni, coaches, players, athletic trainers, team physicians who would love to deliver the message that pitch counts, workloads, but also teach mechanics, teach good mechanics. And, you know, if you can't control a fastball, you shouldn't be worried about throwing a slider and a curveball. There's a sequence, chronological sequence in the pitches you should be throwing, and it's a fastball to a changeup. And once you can control those two things, and by the way, a fastball and a changeup will make you a lot of money in the big leagues right now if you throw them where you want to throw them. But I put the onus on Major League Baseball a little bit and help us get the message out to protect our industry and our sport for the future.
Well, that's a great message right there. I mean, you're right, because a lot of these young athletes that are having these injuries are unfortunately the best players, because best players usually play a lot. And when that happens, injuries occur. So that's definitely, if we want to see the next wave of great player come through, we have to start looking at it from our chair and looking down.
I'm actually, Corey, I hate to cut you off. It popped in my head. As you know, I'm rehabbing one of the greatest pitchers of our generation, coming back from Tommy John, Jacob deGrom, right. And wonderful guy and a hard worker, totally dedicated to getting back, and just a pleasure to work with. But he was a shortstop in high school and in college. And I worked with Buck Showalter many years ago, and Buck was as good as anybody as far as putting the team together. And he used to say, man, I'd love to have a major league team of a lot of high school and college shortstops who then found their specialty and kind of evolved to a new role on the field. So it's, protect those kids as long as you can before you let them loose.
No, that's great. And to that point, protecting our kids comes with having some good health care and especially a good athletic trainer around them. We are fortunate enough to have large staffs with physicians readily available and great coaches to try to help keep our players on the field. But what would you say to that young athletic trainer, or that high school athletic trainer, the secondary school athletic trainer, or even the college athletic trainer that is seeing this for the first time and maybe getting pushback from parents or getting pushback from coaches, and needing to find their voice and how to help stop this problem from growing?
I think I can promise you there will be pushback. I think pushback after 43 years in baseball from some parents, and I think it's the role of PBATs to educate athletic trainers as well as all the other healthcare professionals to give them ammunition to take back to the parents and back to the youth baseball coaches and to protect the kids. And again, I challenge Major League Baseball at some level to help us do that, help us get that message out there. It's so critical, so important.
Well, I'll have one last question for you, JMO, before I let you go. If you had one message to give everybody out there how to help stop this, how to help curb this, what would be your one message? And to piggyback off that a little bit, what do you feel you're most proud of from PBATs on helping create a solution for this problem?
I think the message is throwing is a part of baseball. And baseball is a wonderful sport. It's America's sport. And, if you learn to do some basic things, average talent will take you a long, long way. So it's really a sport where you don't have to be, 6'6". You don't have to be 225 pounds. There are guys of all different sizes playing in Major League Baseball. So the opportunity is there, but there are some very vulnerable years in a player's career that he needs to be protected. And there are a lot of ways to do it. Getting stronger, great range of motion, watching shoulder motion, but also it's monitoring workloads and protecting those elbows. So I think it's great. And as far as PBATs goes, I think we got some messages out there, but, maybe on our website, we should have a page just dedicated to youth baseball and protection of youth baseball, and protect these kids and make it available to every coach and every parent and anybody who has enough interest in the kids to protect them. And, my talk is called The Impact Youth Baseball Has on Major League Baseball, and it's a huge impact. And maybe we should just put that up there. I know the Andrews Institute Plano has one of that talk actually in their library, and it's had several hundred views. But I don't think any athletic trainer is going to walk away from helping an athlete in any situation. And, we're recognized as the best in baseball, and it's on us to educate those who need our help.
Well, thank you, Jamie. We appreciate your time and your insight, and hopefully, if nothing else, some people start listening to the experts of the experts. So thank you again for your time, JMO.
Thanks, Corey, for doing this and getting the message out. It's so important, and we have a role to play, and I appreciate all of your guys' help and work in getting that message out.
Thank you for listening to Inside Athletic Training and our Tales of the Tape Sports Medicine series on Youth Arm Health and Sports Specialization. Don't forget to tune in next week for Episode 2 with Brian Ebel, the head athletic trainer of the Baltimore Orioles.